we've come to the sad but undeniable conclusion that major pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors are complicit, utilizing practices like bogus research that play down the addictive qualities of these opiates, misleading, deceptive, and dangerous marketing practices that promote overprescribing, unethical financial schemes that distorted and redirected doctors' prescribing patterns toward opiates and rewarded them for prescribing enormous quantities of pills. And worst of all, sitting idly by as this crisis unfolded. And along the way, some members of the medical profession have also been complicit. Bottom of the barrel physicians who operate pill mills, making a living by knowingly prescribing vast quantities of pills to people suffering from addiction. We know who you are. We need to send a message in one strong, united voice that misleading and deceptive marketing practices are unacceptable in this county and in our country. That is why today I'm announcing that Anne Arundel County intends to file a civil action against opioid manufacturers, distributors, and our county's pill mill doctors, whose marketing and prescribing practices helped ignite and have radically amplified this crisis in Maryland and here in Anne Arundel County. Those who have had a hand in this epidemic must be held accountable. We believe our jurisdiction is uniquely positioned for successful legal action. Our community, families, and friends, some of whom are here today, have been harmed, and we need to get them help. Additionally, healthcare providers, law enforcement, and other county departments are shouldering a burden for which they do not have the resources to bear. There is no one single solution to this crisis, but this lawsuit will help us in our efforts to stop deceptive marketing practices, re-educate doctors and patients regarding the true risks and appropriate uses of prescription opioids, encourage the medical community to take action, take advantage of existing guidelines, like the CDC's guidelines, and dispose of drugs that are sitting in medicine cabinets all across the county that are available for misuse and diversion. The county also needs to be reimbursed for the considerable costs it has paid in addressing this crisis, including emergency responses, social services, and health care. But reimbursement for these financial costs is not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to stop this crisis, to stop overprescribing, to stop misleading marketing practices, and to help people regain their lives. To explain the depths of this crisis in our county, I'd like to ask our health officer, Fran Phillips, to say a few words.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning. Again, I'd like to take some time this morning to give you some details, some background on what this opioid crisis means here in Anne Arundel County in terms of the damage it has inflicted on residents, as well as its impact on county government, including the health department. As the county executive said, we are experiencing a rate of drug overdoses and deaths unlike ever before. We rank third among jurisdictions in the state in terms of overdoses and deaths, and as was reported over the weekend, the drug death rate in Maryland rose faster last year than any state reported in the country. Here in Anne Arundel County, our opioid-related deaths jumped 90% between 2015 and 2016, and the number is still rising. As of yesterday, the county had 740 overdoses, of which 96 were fatal since the start of the year. And these counts, which are provided by our police department, do not include county residents who make their own way to hospitals or who overdose and recover at home. These are tragic numbers, but behind those numbers are real people who are so often young people in the prime of life. We know this. They are sons, sisters, friends, as you will hear in a minute. Virtually everyone in this county has been affected personally, has a personal connection or loss as a result of opioid misuse. And most tragic is how often those that are addicted to opioids are parents with young children. Countless children in our county are living in households every day disrupted by the cycle of addiction and traumatized by mom or dad's relapsing behavior. A growing caseload of children in substance abusing households are receiving intensive case management by the Department of Social Services. This year, more than 4 babies every week will be born in our hospitals with symptoms of drug withdrawal due to exposure before birth. Children in these households are at incredible risk themselves. So that's why, for the first time ever yesterday when school opened, every school nurse in every school in this county has been trained and supplied with Narcan kits in order to reverse an overdose should that emergency happen in school. So everywhere I go, people ask, why us? And we don't have an answer for this, but we do know that exposure to prescription opioids is the gateway drug in our county. It is the gateway to street drugs, to addiction, and that's true for most of our overdose cases. And we know in Anne Arundel County, we are a county awash in opioids. Our per capita opioid consumption in this county exceeds both the state rate and the national rates. In fact, our consumption rate is twice the rate of Montgomery County, twice the rate of Prince George's County, and Howard County. Incredibly, in 2015, there were enough opioids prescribed in this county to give each county resident a 2-week supply. While opioids can provide valid pain relief in certain medical circumstances, our overall rates are entirely unwarranted, and we are seeing red flags in the prescribing practices of certain local prescribers. As the county executive noted, we have adopted every single strategy considered to be effective, and our numbers are still rising. The epidemic is devastating families and overwhelming county services. In the health department alone, we are scrambling to open new treatment sites, supporting prevention and community recovery efforts, training and issuing Narcan to hundreds of at-risk families and employers, and still, we continue to see these numbers rise. Every one of our programs, from school health to elderly care, is affected. In the health department, even our environmental health inspectors are seeing more and more properties which are neglected or with housing problems as a result of the cycle of addiction. The health department is just one county agency. Police, fire, detention center, social services, personnel, we are all overwhelmed. These are vital taxpayer-supported services that are being diverted from their intended purpose. We are supporting people who are struggling with need, but we need help. I'll close by saying I've spent a career in public health, including 15 years as health officer in this county, and I have never encountered a public health crisis anywhere on the level of what we are experiencing with opioid emergency today. So I welcome the relief that this lawsuit can offer. So with that, I will turn to Elizabeth Smith of Motley Rice to talk about the legal issues involved in the suit.
Thank you, and good morning. My name's Elizabeth Smith. I'm an attorney at Motley Rice Law Firm. And we at Motley Rice are grateful and proud to be working with Anne Arundel County on this important issue. Motley Rice does bring a depth of experience to this issue. We represent cities, states, and counties around the country in opioid-related litigation. We care deeply about addressing the opioid crisis, and we're committed to approaching this in a way that makes sense for Anne Arundel County. We have just begun this work with Anne Arundel County. As you can imagine, every jurisdiction is different, but nothing is off the table at this point in terms of the causes of action we could pursue or defendants that we could include in the case. We'll be looking at which claims make sense based on state and local law and the facts as we find them here in the county. In other jurisdictions, there's been a focus on consumer fraud claims, False Claims Act claims, nuisance law claims. Also, unjust enrichment claims have been brought, fraudulent and negligent misrepresentation, breach of warranty. Those are just examples of some of the claims that have been included in other cases around the country. Those are claims that we're evaluating. We're evaluating whether Anne Arundel's own county laws would be supportive of any causes of action. With regard to potential defendants, again, the conduct is different in every jurisdiction. We'll be looking hard at what has happened here in Anne Arundel specifically, and the direction that we have from the county is to take all appropriate action based on what we discovered during the investigation. To give you a sense of what's going on in the country in this litigation, there are at least 40 cases filed on behalf of municipalities, counties, and states. There are a number of states that have filed. The city of Chicago has filed. Counties in New York, West Virginia, Ohio, California, and other places have filed. The defendants vary in the cases in different jurisdictions. The causes of action vary. So it's not a one-size-fits-all litigation. We'll be conducting our investigation here in Anne Arundel to determine the facts and the applicable laws for moving forward here in Anne Arundel County. We're looking forward to getting started on our work with Anne Arundel County, and this is a serious problem here, as you've heard, and we're committed to doing what we can to help Anne Arundel County in addressing this crisis.
Are you introducing our guests?
Yes. Good morning. My name is Nancy Schrum, Director of Constituent Services for County Executive Shue. I'm also the coordinator for Not My Child, which is our theme across the county, where we talk a lot about prevention education. I'm here to introduce Denise Williams and Ginger Rosala, two courageous women who have put their story out in hopes that other families understand the pathways to addiction. So I'd like to introduce Denise and Ginger, and Denise will speak first.
Hi, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for this move. It's phenomenal. Anyway, I have twin sons. My one son, Matthew, was in a serious car accident. He needed 7 operations and 4 days a week of occupational physical therapy. He was given unlimited opiates for the pain. We trusted the doctor that everything was okay, and while he was given unlimited, he was also given multiple types of opiates all at the same time. Matt suffered a long addiction. He still suffers today, mental health, but through the years, he has a twin brother, Ryan. Ryan had some mental health issues, and he went to Matt, and got some heroin from Matt because Matt's addiction went into the heroin when he could no longer afford the prescribed medicines. Ryan lost his addiction to a heroin overdose in 2015. He leaves behind a 9-year-old little boy, and today, while Matt is alive, he suffers from the mental health that goes along with addiction. He has attempted suicide several times, and we have him, he's been just in and out of hospitals. I've lost one son, and I live in fear. I'm going to lose the second one because he can't live with what happened to his brother and the damage that these opiates have done to him. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ginger Rosella, and I am Jake Patty's mom. Jacob died of a heroin overdose on July 19th, 2013. Jacob's addiction started after an injury riding his bike. He was prescribed multiple pain medications, Oxycontin, Percocet, you name it, he took it. His father and I gave him his pain medicine as prescribed for months and months and months. Jacob was in high school at the time. He was homeschooled because his injury was so severe. We realized that Jacob had a problem, and we did rehab and sober living. Jacob even did a little time in jail for drinking and driving. Jacob re-injured himself in 2013. Took him to the doctor in Annapolis. I was standing right there. He was 23 at the time. And the doctor said, "You need to have surgery on your shoulder. I'm going to give you these pain medicine in the meantime." And my son said, I was standing right there, "I'm in recovery." And the doctor put his hand on my son's shoulder and said, "Son, for the little bit of time you'll be on this pain medicine, you'll be fine." We begged Jake not to fill the prescription, but he did. He had his surgery, went back to work. It was a trigger, right? You give someone who used to use substances again. He had had 2 years clean. They ran out. It's not as easy to get pills on the street, but heroin is cheap. My son was using heroin about a month and a half. I got a call one morning that his father and younger brother, who was a senior in high school at the time, had found him dead in the bathroom. And he didn't have a child. He never will have a child. And it has affected our family. Addiction, substance use, whatever you want to call it, is a family disease. And so now I do whatever I can do so that no other family has to live the hell or the new normal, when I'm trying to be politically correct, that we live every single day. And thank you for Anne Arundel County for standing up and saying enough is enough. We're done, and we're going to win this fight. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're happy to answer any questions.
I'm curious if Frank can speak toward this in terms of the 80% statistic that you came up with.
Right, it is the 80% statistic comes from the New England Journal of Medicine, and it has been the subject of a number of literature studies tracking back to the experience of overdose victims, to their previous experience. And so it is between 75 and 80% of those overdose victims say their first exposure to opioids was not through street drugs, but their first exposure was through prescription drugs.
Maryland is probably among, if not the hardest hit states in the country, and among the 24 jurisdictions in Maryland, we are the third hardest hit. So that puts us among the most impacted jurisdictions in the entire country. Yes.
Did Motley Rice approach the county, or did the county approach Motley Rice, and is there a cap on the legal fees?
I'll let the county attorney address our process for attorney selection.
Good morning, I'm Nancy Duden, I'm the Anne Arundel County Attorney. After speaking with the county executive and his administration about the desire to do this, we interviewed several law firms and we chose Motley Rice due to their leadership in this area. So we approached them, they did not approach us. The fee arrangement is contingency, there is no cost to the county at all, and that's pretty much it.
The pharmaceutical industry and related industries like the distribution industry, the drugstore industry, and ultimately the physicians who prescribe drugs is an immense component of our economy. Probably, I would barely venture a guess, but it certainly exceeds $20 billion. And 20% of our economy today. So this is an enormous area, and our focus at this point is on the manufacturers of prescription opiates that engaged in bogus research or misleading marketing or in unethical financial practices. We are also focusing on the distribution industry. The pharmaceutical companies don't themselves distribute drugs. They are transferred from manufacturers to distributors who then get them to their points of retail sale around the country, drugstores and other outlets. And then, of course, doctors, most of whom are ethical, professional, and doing the right thing. But unfortunately, in Arundel County, like many jurisdictions around the country, have a very small component of bottom feeder doctors who make their living prescribing vast amounts of these drugs to people who are suffering from this disease. And those are the people we're targeting. So the exact number of manufacturers, we have not yet determined. The exact number of distributors, not yet determined. We have not made a decision yet about the drugstore sector, and we have identified a very definite number of physicians whom, based on prescribing practices, we know are overprescribing opiates, to the point of criminal degree of excessive prescribing.
So you said you have identified the physicians?
Yes,
You know.
we know who they are. We know exactly who they are. We know where they are, and we're coming to get them.
Could you repeat the question for me?
Could you talk to us about, in the scheme of crime, what does heroin and opioids, what part do they play in that in the county?
Huge. in our culture, we say that probably between 80 and 85% of crime in every jurisdiction is drug driven in one way, shape, or form. You know, you have folks suffering in the cycle of addiction, stealing, robbing people every day to get enough money to go get the drugs. You have them victimizing their parents, grandparents, spouses, and children to get enough going to get high. You have the stressors caused by addiction causing domestic violence in homes. You have the stressors caused by addiction causing child abuse in homes. It is probably the largest single driver of crime in this county, in this state, and in this country that exists, and that's not new. The beauty of today for me is that I see my entire county government trying to make a difference in a situation that the cops felt like they were the only ones fighting for the last year. I challenge somebody to look at me and tell me that drug dealing is a benign crime when you see what it's done to these ladies behind me and their families. It's not benign. It's violent. It's pervasive. It destroys people. It destroys communities. And if we don't get in front of it, it's going to destroy our culture as a country. So I would say to you that it's the epidemic that you hear about every day. Did I answer your question okay? Thank you.
Chief, if you could stay on. I was curious, I know that a couple weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago, you had attributed an increase in the number of overdose deaths to specifically to prescription opioids and other drugs as opposed to heroin or fentanyl. Can you talk a little bit about, is that an uprise in terms of abuse of prescription opioids? Is it anything that we can contribute to this overall crisis?
So I think yes and no, Phil, because when we talk about prescription opioids in this context, and you're talking about fentanyl and carfentanil, right? Your question today focuses on fentanyl and carfentanil. So fentanyl and carfentanil are both scheduled drugs that have legitimate uses in the world, right? But they're incredibly potent. You've heard me say the numbers. I don't know whether it's 50 and 500 or 100 and 1,000 times more potent than diacetylmorphine, which is the chemical compound name for heroin, right? But they're being marketed, sold, and ingested illicitly in conjunction with heroin. They're being marketed as heroin, but the drug dealers on the illicit market get a lot more bang for their buck out of fentanyl and carfentanil than they do heroin, if that makes sense. And the perverse consequence of addiction is such that when folks struggling in the cycle of addiction find out a product is killing people, they flock to it. So that causes rises in our numbers, without a doubt. Did I answer your question okay?
Well, I was asking more about legally prescribed prescription opioids, as that was, I think about 2 months ago, a number of medical examiner records had come back and said that in fact many had died from abusing prescription opioids and drugs. I was curious if there was a rise in your responses to that.
I'm not, in our responses, yes. And I know your next question is to talk more about it, so no, I'm not going to talk more about it here today. But the bottom line is, human beings in a society where we're supposed to respect each other are supposed to be bound by legality, morality, and ethical decision making, right? If you've crossed a toe across the line of those three things that makes it actionable for me and my cops, we're going to chop the toe off if we can. Does that make sense? Okay.
We recognize the nature of this crisis fairly early. I would say by national standards, we were on this relatively quickly. We moved very aggressively to identify best practices, the best kinds of programs, the best kinds of initiatives from a law enforcement, education, and healthcare perspective from all across the country, and we stole every good idea we could. We are shameless about using anything we can get from any place if it will help this crisis resolve. But what's so frightening is, despite all of that effort, despite the fact that we are at the forefront, we're losing. And that's why we have to redouble our efforts, and that's why we need to take actions like the action we're taking today to stop this crisis at the front end by changing physician prescribing behaviors, by forcing the manufacturers to take actions that they should have taken on their own a long time ago. and as a companion to that effort at the front end, educating our young people. That is the ultimate solution to all of this, is educating young people about the dangers of these drugs. These are one and done. One and done. You try it once, that's it. There's a very high probability that you will become addicted to these drugs. You will wreck your family, your career, and probably lose your life. So it's about education, it's about front-end practices, and I think over time, as our guest said, we will win this battle one day.
You think the Attorney General's office should follow suit?
We intend to be working very closely with the Attorney General. Attorney General Frosch is very aware of this problem, and we look forward to working with him and the state to coordinate our efforts.
Is this considered a novel way to, I mean, I know this is a first for our state. Is this like a new way to attack this crisis from a different angle?
Well, I would say this is rather novel. There have been a handful of cases along these same lines filed around the country, but very, very few. There are 3,000 counties in the United States and innumerable municipalities, plus the 50 states. And I would say that we are likely in years to come to see many, many more of these kinds of cases. And it would not at all surprise me if there is ultimately some sort of global, national combining of these cases to reach a final settlement with the people who have committed the actions that have led to this crisis.
Those cases are you guys, your firms, have has another firm finished any of theirs, or are you guys kind of at the forefront of the whole thing?
I don't know about whether any other firms have finished any of their cases. There could have been some resolutions amongst those other firms, but in terms of cases that have actually gone through litigation, no, there are no cases that have actually gone to verdict.
I think a few settlements.
There's been a few settlements, but no case has gone all the way through the litigation process.
Sounds like this could be a very lengthy process. Is the end goal getting money out of these companies? What are you hoping comes out of this?
We have two primary goals. The first is less important than the second. The first goal is getting reimbursed for the incredible financial costs of combating this crisis so that we can take those very same dollars and recycle them back into combating this very same crisis. But that is not our primary goal. Our primary goal, the second goal, is stopping this crisis, is stopping people from falling into the trap of addiction, from ruining their lives. And that's how I look at this litigation, first and foremost, as part of a broad range of efforts that we are taking to combat this this incredible public health challenge from a public safety, public health, and education perspective. That's our primary goal.
Are the pharmaceutical companies being named in these lawsuits? Is it like 2 or 3 major companies?
They will be named.
But we're not ready, we can't do that
Not
yet
today.
here. Can you name them from your other ones, or is that something we have to look out for?
That certainly can be, found in searches, but I can tell you some of the defendants that are involved in some of these cases include Purdue, who manufactures OxyContin. There's Teva is a defendant. Janssen is a defendant in some of the cases. They're a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. There's Endo, Actavis or Allergen. There's those are just some of the manufacturers that have been named in some of the cases around the country.
And some of the distributors are McKesson, Cardinal, AmerisourceBergen, very large national firms.
Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you very much.